The school music hall was filled with soft chatter that afternoon. Students were setting up instruments, laughing, and practicing for the upcoming spring showcase. In one corner stood a piano, old but still beautiful, its keys slightly yellowed from years of use. Everyone wanted a turn at it. Everyone except a quiet girl who stood near the doorway, her hands tucked behind her back. She watched others play, her eyes following every movement of their fingers as if memorizing each note. She loved the piano more than anything. Whenever she passed the hall, she stopped to listen to whoever was playing. The music made her feel something she couldn't describe, as if all her thoughts and emotions had a voice. But she had never touched a piano before. Her family couldn't afford lessons, and there wasn't one at home. Still, she often dreamed of playing it, imagining her fingers gliding across the keys, creating something beautiful that people would stop and listen to. That afternoon, as she stood alone, a few older students were gathered around the piano, showing off. They laughed and played random notes loudly, pretending to know songs but mostly making noise. The teacher had stepped out for a while, and the group took advantage of the break. The girl watched quietly, smiling a little despite their messy playing. Her curiosity was growing stronger. Every note seemed to call her closer, like a soft whisper inviting her to try. When one of the students got up and left the bench, she took a slow step forward. Her heart raced as she reached out and gently placed her fingers on the keys. The smooth surface felt like something magical. She pressed one key softly. A clear sound echoed in the room. Then another. Her fingers moved carefully, exploring, trying to form something that made sense. Just as she started to play a few more notes, one of the students turned and saw her. He laughed loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "Look who thinks she can play," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Another joined in, saying, "Hey, careful, you might break it." The group burst into laughter. Her hands froze in place. Her face turned red and her throat tightened. "I wasn't. I was just trying it," she said softly. But no one seemed to hear. One girl rolled her eyes and said, "You should leave that thing to people who actually know what they're doing." The laughter grew louder, echoing through the hall. She quickly pulled her hands back and stepped away, staring down at the floor. Her chest hurt. Not because of the words, but because of the way they made her feel. Small and foolish for even trying. Before anyone could see the tears forming in her eyes, she turned and left the room. The sound of their laughter followed her down the hallway. She walked outside where the cool air hit her face, and she finally let the tears fall. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was disappointment in herself. She had finally dared to do something she dreamed of, and it ended in humiliation. That night at home, she sat on her bed thinking about it again and again. Every moment replayed in her mind. The laughter, the voices, the look of pity from one of the students. She felt like she had ruined her chance to ever try again. Her family noticed she was quieter than usual, but she brushed it off, saying she was tired. In truth, she couldn't stop thinking about the sound of the piano, even with all the pain attached to it. Days passed and she avoided the music hall completely. Whenever she walked by it, her steps quickened. She could hear the faint sound of students practicing inside, but she never looked in. Still, when she was alone, her fingers would sometimes move as if they were pressing invisible keys. She hummed melodies she didn't know, made up tunes that came from her heart. It was her secret, her small way of holding on to that dream. One afternoon, as she waited after school for her ride, she noticed a small keyboard in the storage room near the art department. It was dusty, missing a few keys, but it still looked playable. She stood there for a long time, staring at it, wondering if she could borrow it. Her heart said yes, but her fear whispered no. She decided to ask the janitor, who was friendly and often talked to her. "Sir, is that old keyboard still working?" she asked shyly. He smiled, surprised that anyone cared about it. "A little. It's not perfect, but it plays. Why do you need it?" She nodded quickly. "Can I borrow it?" "Just for a while?" He hesitated, then chuckled softly. "If you promise to take care of it, sure." "Nobody uses it anyway." Her face lit up. She thanked him again and again before carefully carrying the keyboard home. It wasn't much, but to her it felt like the most precious gift in the world. That night she set it on her small study table. It was missing one black key and some buttons didn't work, but she didn't care. She plugged it in and pressed a single note. The sound was a little distorted, but it was music. Her music. She smiled for the first time in days. She spent hours that night pressing keys, trying to form simple melodies she remembered from hearing others play. At first, everything sounded wrong. Her fingers were stiff, her timing off, but she didn't give up. Every mistake only made her try again. She had no teacher, no lessons, only her ears and determination. Over the next few weeks, she practiced in secret. After finishing her homework, she would close her room door and put on headphones so no one else could hear. Sometimes she stayed up late, eyes heavy but heart full. Each night she got a little better. Slowly, her fingers began to move more confidently. The sounds that came out started to make sense, forming little tunes that made her smile. When she got tired, she watched free tutorials on an old phone, learning where to place her fingers, how to move them smoothly. She didn't understand the fancy musical terms, but she learned by listening. The internet became her teacher, and her own mistakes became her lessons. Sometimes she remembered that awful moment in the school hall and how everyone laughed at her. But instead of feeling sad, she used it as fuel. Every time she sat at her keyboard, she imagined proving them wrong one day. Not with anger, but with music that spoke louder than their laughter ever could. There were nights when she got frustrated. Her hands hurt and her patience wore thin, but then she would close her eyes and picture herself sitting at that grand piano again. Only this time no one was laughing. They were listening. That vision kept her going. One evening, her younger brother heard faint sounds coming from her room. He peeked in and saw her playing softly, her head bent in concentration. He watched quietly, amazed. When she noticed him, she quickly stopped and blushed. "Don't tell anyone," she whispered. He smiled and nodded, sealing her secret. Her confidence slowly grew. By the end of the month, she could play short songs without stopping. She even composed a few simple melodies of her own. Music became her comfort, her escape, her silent voice. The laughter that once haunted her became background noise, fading further away with each note she played. One afternoon, while waiting for her turn to use the library computer, she overheard a group of students talking about the upcoming spring performance. They mentioned how the school pianist might not perform because of a family trip. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't her moment yet, but a tiny spark of hope flickered inside her. Maybe someday she could take that spot, not to show off, but to finally share what she had kept hidden. She smiled to herself as she left the school that day. The sky was painted with soft evening colors, and for the first time in a long while she felt light. The piano was no longer a symbol of humiliation for her. It had become her friend, her teacher, and her quiet companion through lonely nights. She didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was certain: she would never let anyone's laughter stop her again. What started as a moment of shame was slowly turning into the beginning of something beautiful. And deep down, she knew that someday those same people who had mocked her would hear her play, and they wouldn't be laughing anymore. The weeks passed quietly, and her secret practice became a part of her daily routine. Each night after everyone went to sleep, she sat by the little keyboard with her headphones on, letting the soft glow of the lamp light her way. Her fingers, once unsure, now moved with a quiet confidence. She still made mistakes, but she didn't get discouraged anymore. Every wrong note taught her something new. The sound of her progress became her own kind of music, a reminder that growth doesn't always need applause. One morning, her music teacher made an announcement in class. The annual school performance was coming soon, and students were encouraged to audition. The room filled with excitement. Everyone began talking about what they would perform: songs, dances, short plays. She stayed silent, pretending not to care, though her heart raced. She wanted to sign up, but she didn't have the courage. The memory of that awful day when everyone laughed at her still lingered in her mind like a shadow that wouldn't leave. During lunch break, she found herself walking toward the music hall again. The piano was there, gleaming softly under the sunlight streaming through the windows. She stood at the door, her hands trembling slightly. No one was inside. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. Then, without thinking too much, she walked in and sat down on the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys. The smell of polished wood filled the air. She closed her eyes and pressed the first note. It sounded beautiful. She smiled faintly and played another. The notes flowed together naturally, forming a melody she had been practicing for weeks on her old keyboard. For those few moments, she forgot everything: the laughter, the fear, the judgment. There was only the music. But before she could finish the tune, the door opened. "Hey, what are you doing here?" a voice called out. She turned around quickly and saw one of the older students, the same one who had mocked her months ago. He looked at her with disbelief. "You again? Still trying to play that thing?" he said, smirking. She froze, her fingers still resting on the keys. "I was just practicing," she said quietly. He laughed. "Practicing? You really don't learn, do you?" He shook his head and walked closer, still amused. "You should leave this to the people who actually belong here." The word stung, but this time something inside her didn't break. Instead of crying or walking away, she simply looked at him and said softly, "Everyone starts somewhere." Then she stood up and left the room without another word. Her heart pounded, but not from shame, from courage. It was the first time she had stood up for herself. That night she practiced harder than ever before. She wanted to prove not to others but to herself that she was capable. The keyboard keys were worn, but they still sang under her touch. She practiced until her fingers hurt, but every ache felt like progress. Slowly her playing became smoother, more expressive. She started to understand how music could tell a story without words. A week later, her teacher announced that they were short on performers for the showcase auditions. Anyone who wanted to try could come forward. Her classmates chatted excitedly, but she stayed quiet, staring at the form on the notice board. Her heart said yes, but her mind was filled with doubts. She didn't have a fancy instrument, no lessons, and no one believed she could do it. But then she remembered how far she had come. She took a deep breath, picked up the pen, and wrote her name down. When she got home that day, she could hardly eat. Her stomach was tied in knots. The thought of performing in front of others terrified her. But she reminded herself of the promise she made the night she first touched the piano after being mocked, that she would never let fear silence her again. Over the next few days, she practiced nonstop. She rehearsed the same piece again and again until her fingers knew it by heart. She focused on every note, every pause, every emotion she wanted to share through the music. There were moments when she felt like giving up, but then she imagined herself sitting on that stage, her fingers gliding over real piano keys, and she pushed through. Finally, the day of the audition arrived. Her hands felt cold as she walked into the hall. Dozens of students were there, chatting and laughing. Some had guitars, others had sheet music. She felt out of place, but kept reminding herself that she belonged there too. When it was her turn, she walked up to the stage slowly. The teacher smiled encouragingly. "Take your time," he said. She sat down, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the piano. The first few notes came out shaky, but she didn't stop. She closed her eyes and let the music guide her. Soon the melody filled the room, gentle and emotional. The chatter in the hall faded. Even the teacher leaned forward, listening closely. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before soft applause filled the room. She smiled shyly and stood up. The teacher nodded, impressed. "That was beautiful," he said. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She hesitated, unsure what to say. "Just by practicing at home," she replied. The teacher smiled again, clearly moved. "Keep it up. You have real talent." For the first time she felt seen, not as the quiet girl who once embarrassed herself, but as someone who had something worth sharing. The rest of the day passed in a blur. When the results were announced, her name was on the list of performers. She couldn't believe it. She had earned her spot. That evening she went home and sat at her little keyboard, tears of joy filling her eyes. She played the same songs she performed at the audition, each note feeling more alive than ever. Her brother peeked in again, smiling proudly. "You did it," he whispered. She nodded, unable to stop smiling. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. Her teacher gave her permission to practice on the school piano during lunch breaks. At first she was nervous, afraid of being laughed at again. But when she played, even a few of the same students who had mocked her months ago stopped to listen. They didn't say anything, they just listened. That was enough for her. One day, as she was finishing her practice, the same boy who had insulted her walked in again. He didn't say anything this time. Instead, he leaned against the door and watched her play. When she finished, he simply said, "You're actually pretty good." She didn't reply, just smiled politely. It wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about peace. She had forgiven him long ago without even realizing it. As the day of the performance drew closer, she began to feel both excited and terrified. The stage, the audience, the bright lights, everything felt so much bigger than her. But deep inside, she knew she belonged there. Her music was ready. Her heart was ready. The night before the event, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the journey in her mind, from that first humiliating moment to where she was now. She thought of the laughter, the tears, the long nights of practice, and the courage it took to sign up for the audition. Every step had led her here. Before going to bed, she sat one last time at her keyboard and played softly. The tune floated through the quiet night. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. When she finished, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow I'll play with my heart." Then she closed her eyes and smiled. Morning came quickly. As she walked to school, her hands trembled slightly, but her heart was calm. The girl who had once been too afraid to touch a piano was now about to perform in front of everyone. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for sure. She had already won by finding her voice through music. The morning of the school performance arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves. The campus was buzzing with energy. Students carried costumes, instruments, and props, chatting loudly about their acts. Inside the main hall, teachers moved around, making sure everything was ready. The lights were being tested, the curtains adjusted, and the piano polished until it shone. Amid all the noise and rush, she stood quietly near the backstage area, holding her trembling hands together. Her heart was pounding so loudly that she could almost hear it. She peeked through the curtain and saw rows of chairs filling up with parents, teachers, and students. The stage looked huge from where she stood. It was her first time performing in front of such a crowd. She had spent countless nights preparing for this moment, yet now that it was here, fear crept in. What if she forgot a note? What if her hands shook? What if people laughed again? She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. Her teacher noticed her standing there and walked over. "You'll do great," he said kindly. "Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing what you love." His words helped her breathe a little easier. One by one, the other performers went on stage. There were dances, songs, skits, and instrument performances. The audience clapped and cheered after each act. When her name was finally announced, she froze for a moment. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to move. The teacher gave her a reassuring nod as she stepped onto the stage. The hall suddenly seemed silent. The bright lights blinded her for a second. She sat down at the piano, her hands trembling slightly above the keys. She took a deep breath, remembering all those nights she practiced alone in her small room. This was her moment, the one she had dreamed about ever since she first touched the piano. The first note rang softly through the hall, then another. Slowly, her nerves began to fade. Her fingers found their rhythm, gliding smoothly across the keys. The melody was soft at first, then grew stronger and more emotional. The sound filled the entire room, wrapping everyone in its warmth. She forgot the crowd, the lights, the pressure. All she could feel was the music flowing through her. People in the audience leaned forward, surprised. They had not expected this quiet girl to play so beautifully. Even the students who had once laughed at her sat in stunned silence. Each note carried emotion, the pain, the patience, the quiet strength that had brought her here. She played with her eyes closed, lost in her world. When the final note faded, there was a pause, a long, breathless silence, and then the hall erupted in applause. The sound was so loud it almost startled her. She looked up, her heart racing, and saw people standing, clapping, and cheering. Her teacher smiled proudly, his eyes shining. For a second, she didn't know what to do. Then she stood, gave a small bow, and smiled shyly. Backstage, everyone congratulated her. Some students who had ignored her before now told her how amazing she was. "You were incredible," one of them said. "I didn't know you could play like that." She thanked them politely, still in disbelief. It all felt like a dream. The same hall that once echoed with laughter at her expense was now filled with applause. After the show ended, her teacher called her aside. "You have something special," he said warmly. "You should keep playing. Maybe even join our school music team." Her eyes widened. The thought of being part of the official team felt unreal. She nodded slowly, unable to find the right words. When she got home that evening, she placed her certificate on her study table and sat quietly for a long time. The memories of the day played in her mind like a movie. The crowd's applause, the smiling faces, the feeling of pride, everything felt surreal. She smiled to herself, realizing how far she had come from the day she had been laughed at. Her little brother came running into the room. "I saw your video," he said excitedly. "You were so good." Apparently, one of her classmates had recorded the performance and shared it on the school's social media page. She felt a little embarrassed but also proud. It meant that people actually cared about her music. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Students she barely knew started greeting her in the hallway. Some asked if she could teach them a few songs. Even teachers congratulated her in class. It was strange but wonderful. For once, she wasn't invisible, but she didn't let the attention get to her head. Deep down, she remembered how it all began, with laughter, failure, and long nights of practice. That memory kept her humble and grounded. One afternoon, while she was packing her books after class, the same boy who had laughed at her months ago walked over. She looked up, unsure what to expect. He hesitated before speaking. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "I just wanted to say, I was wrong. You're really good." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then she smiled softly and replied, "Thank you." That was all. There was no anger left in her heart, only peace. The forgiveness she gave him felt lighter than she imagined. He smiled back and walked away. And just like that, the chapter of humiliation that had once haunted her finally closed. Her teacher soon invited her to join the school's music group. They practiced after classes and prepared for inter-school competitions. It was the first time she played with other musicians. At first, it was challenging, keeping up with everyone, following the rhythm and working as a team. But she loved every bit of it. Each day she learned something new. One evening after practice, as the group was packing up, her teacher asked her to stay behind for a moment. "You know," he said, "we're performing at the district event next month. I want you to lead one of the songs." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Me?" she asked softly. He nodded. "You've earned it." When she walked home that day, she couldn't stop smiling. The girl who once played alone in a dark room was now leading a team performance. It felt unreal, but it was happening because she had never stopped trying. At home, she told her family the news. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Her brother jumped around, clapping. Her father, who had always been quiet about such things, smiled proudly. "See? Hard work always pays off," he said softly. That night, she sat by her little keyboard again. It looked even older now, the missing keys more noticeable, but she smiled at it with gratitude. This small, broken instrument had changed her life. It had given her confidence, purpose, and a dream. She played the same songs she had performed at school. The sound was a little rough, but the feeling was the same. Every note reminded her of the journey, from that first timid touch to standing on stage and hearing applause. She had learned something far more valuable than music. She had learned the power of patience and belief. As the days went by, she practiced with her team for the upcoming district event. Her teacher helped her polish her performance, encouraging her to play with more emotion. She spent long evenings perfecting every part of her song, determined to make it even better than before. Sometimes she still doubted herself. There were moments when she made mistakes during rehearsals and felt frustrated, but then she remembered how far she had come. Every small failure was just another step toward something greater. The people who once laughed at her were now cheering for her, and that was proof enough that persistence could change everything. One afternoon, after a long practice session, she sat alone in the hall and played quietly. The sunlight from the window hit the piano keys and the golden glow filled the room. As her fingers moved, she felt a calm joy in her heart. She realized she no longer needed validation from anyone. The applause, the praise, they were nice, but what truly mattered was the music itself. It had become her way of speaking when words fell short. She smiled softly as the last note faded away. This was only the beginning of her story, and she knew it. The world might not know her name yet, but someday her music would speak for her, just as it always had. The day of the district music event arrived, and the excitement in the air was electric. Schools from all over the area had sent their teams and solo performers. The hall was enormous, filled with bright lights, banners, and rows of chairs occupied by parents, teachers, and students. The girl walked in with her music team, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. This was bigger than anything she had faced before. The pressure was immense, but she reminded herself of all the practice, all the nights she had spent alone with her little keyboard, and the courage it took to keep going despite the fear. Backstage, her team was buzzing with energy. Some were checking their instruments. Others were running through last-minute rehearsals. She quietly went to the piano, placed her hands on the keys, and closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the very first time she had touched a piano at school, when laughter had filled the hall. That memory made her heart tighten, but also reminded her how far she had come. Every mistake, every tear, every late night of practice had led her here. The announcer called her team's name, and it was time to go on stage. Her heart raced as she walked forward, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The audience seemed massive, their faces filled with expectation. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment but also the thrill of performing. She was ready. She had waited for this, and she would not let fear stop her now. Sitting down at the grand piano, her hands hovered over the keys. The first few notes trembled slightly, but she pushed through, focusing on the music and the emotion it carried. As her fingers moved, the melody grew stronger and more confident. She could hear the harmony with her team behind her, their instruments adding layers of sound that made the music richer. The audience was silent, completely absorbed in the performance. She played with all her heart. The music was no longer just notes on a page or sounds from a keyboard. It was a story of perseverance, of quiet strength, of a girl who refused to give up. Each note carried emotion, the sadness of past mockery, the frustration of mistakes, and the joy of progress. Her fingers moved as if they were telling a story, and the audience felt it. Even the judges leaned forward, listening intently. She could sense the energy in the room changing, from expectation to admiration. As the song reached its climax, she felt a surge of confidence. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and emotion. The harmony of the team behind her blended perfectly, creating a sound so beautiful it seemed to fill every corner of the hall. The applause that followed the final note was thunderous. She opened her eyes to see the audience on their feet, clapping and cheering. Her team members smiled at her, proud and relieved that the performance had gone so well. Backstage, she was almost trembling with excitement. The same students who had mocked her months ago were watching her in awe, whispering to each other. Her teacher approached, smiling broadly. "That was incredible," he said. "You played with such emotion. I'm proud of you." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. She felt a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude. After all the performances, the results were announced. When her team's name was called as the winners of the first prize, she could hardly believe it. The applause was deafening. Parents and teachers came forward to congratulate her. Her teammates hugged her, thrilled to share the victory. She realized in that moment that her perseverance, the countless nights of practice, and the courage to step forward despite fear had all led to this triumph. Later, while celebrating with her family at home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the day she was mocked for touching the piano, the long hours spent practicing in secret, and the moments of self-doubt she had overcome. Every struggle had a purpose. Every small step had prepared her for this moment. She understood now that her music was not just a talent. It was a voice, a way to express herself when words failed. Over the next few weeks, her confidence grew. Students from other classes came to hear her play, asking for tips and lessons. Teachers praised her dedication and improvement. She was even invited to play at the school assembly, a task that would have terrified her months ago, but now she welcomed the opportunity with excitement. She had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. One afternoon, as she practiced alone, the same boy who had mocked her before appeared at the doorway. She paused, unsure of what to expect. He stepped in cautiously, avoiding eye contact, and said softly, "I didn't believe you could do it back then, but now I see I was wrong. You're amazing." She smiled gently, feeling a sense of closure. There was no anger left, only a quiet pride. She nodded and continued playing, letting the music express everything words could not. Her practice sessions became more focused and joyful. She began experimenting with new melodies, creating her own compositions. The keyboard at home, once a small worn-out instrument, had become her trusted companion. She realized that music was more than notes. It was a reflection of her journey, her struggles and her triumphs. Each composition carried a piece of her story. As the months went by, she continued to perform at school events and competitions. Her talent became widely recognized, but she remained humble. She remembered the laughter that once haunted her, the moments of doubt and the endless nights of practice. Those experiences kept her grounded. She understood that her journey was about more than recognition. It was about growth, resilience, and the love of music. Her teacher encouraged her to apply for a regional music program, one that would provide advanced training and opportunities to perform with other talented students. At first, she hesitated, worried she might not be ready, but the support of her family and the encouragement of her teacher gave her courage. She applied, practiced tirelessly, and eventually received an acceptance letter. It was another step forward, another chance to grow. During her first session at the regional program, she met other students who were highly skilled. It was intimidating at first, but she remembered how far she had come and used that confidence to keep going. She learned new techniques, explored different styles of music, and gained exposure to performances that pushed her limits. Each day was a challenge, but also a new opportunity to improve and express herself. One evening, after returning home from a long day at the program, she sat at her little keyboard. It felt different now, almost nostalgic, as if it had been a witness to her entire journey. She played softly, reflecting on how the journey began, with a timid touch, a moment of mockery, and a decision not to give up. The music that flowed from her fingers told the story of her growth, her struggles, and her unwavering determination. She realized that her journey was more than just about playing the piano. It was about finding her voice, believing in herself, and learning to overcome obstacles. She understood that the laughter and doubts of others could no longer define her. Her music was her own, and it carried a power that came from the heart. The experience also taught her about empathy and kindness. She remembered how it felt to be mocked and humiliated, and she resolved to never make anyone else feel the same way. Whenever younger students asked for help or guidance, she shared her knowledge with patience and encouragement. She became a mentor, using her journey to inspire others to pursue their passions despite fear or doubt. As the year went on, her performances became more confident and expressive. The once quiet, timid girl who feared the piano had grown into a young musician, with a clear voice and strong presence. She had learned that success was not just about talent, but about perseverance, resilience, and the courage to continue when the odds seemed against her. Her family continued to support her every step of the way. They attended her performances, encouraged her practice, and celebrated her achievements. Their support, combined with her dedication, created a foundation for continued growth and success. She understood that her journey was not solitary. It was shared with those who believed in her. By the end of the year, she had performed in multiple competitions, school events, and regional programs. Each performance brought new challenges and new rewards. She looked back at the first moment she had touched a piano, the laughter that had once silenced her, and the countless hours she had practiced alone. She smiled, knowing that every step had been worth it. Her music was no longer a secret. It was a gift she shared with the world. Months had passed since her performance at the district music event, and life had changed in ways she had never imagined. She had become more confident, not just in music but in everyday life. People no longer ignored her. Instead, they respected and admired her dedication. The journey had transformed her from a shy girl who once feared a single note into a young musician who could face any challenge with courage. Her daily routine now included both schoolwork and music practice. She continued to explore her piano skills, experimenting with new compositions and learning more advanced techniques at the regional music program. Each practice session was filled with energy and focus. She loved how music could express what words often could not, how it could carry feelings and stories across a room, reaching everyone without a single spoken sentence. Her teacher encouraged her to participate in a national music competition. Initially, the idea was intimidating. She remembered how nervous she had felt performing in front of her school audience, and the thought of performing on a much bigger stage brought back familiar fear. But she also remembered how far she had come and decided to accept the challenge. She wanted to see how much she could grow and to test herself against new experiences. The preparation was intense. She spent countless hours refining her pieces, practicing every note until it felt natural, and working on her posture, breathing, and expression. She pushed herself to practice for longer periods without losing focus, learning to manage stress and transform nervous energy into performance energy. Each day her skills improved and her confidence grew. She had learned the value of persistence and the power of consistent effort. The day of the national competition arrived. The hall was immense, with a stage that seemed almost endless. Competitors from across the country had come, each bringing their own talent and passion. She felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. As she walked backstage, she took a deep breath, reminding herself of all the practice and the obstacles she had overcome. She was ready to share her music, and nothing could take away the confidence she had built. When her name was announced, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by a wave of bright lights and a silent audience waiting in anticipation. Her heart pounded, but she focused on the piano in front of her, the keys gleaming, waiting for her touch. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. The music started softly with careful precision and gradually grew in complexity. Each note flowed naturally, her fingers moving with confidence and grace. The melodies she played told a story of fear, perseverance, struggle, and triumph. The audience listened in awe, captivated by the depth of emotion in her performance. She was not playing to impress them. She was playing to express herself, and the sincerity of her music reached every corner of the hall. As she played, she remembered her journey, the first day she had touched a piano and been mocked, the late nights of secret practice, the small victories and setbacks along the way. Each memory fueled her fingers to play with even more emotion, transforming fear into music that spoke to the hearts of the audience. She realized that her journey had not only shaped her skills but had shaped her character, teaching her patience, resilience, and empathy. When the final note faded, there was a moment of complete silence, as if the hall itself was holding its breath. Then applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than she had ever experienced. The audience rose to their feet, cheering and clapping, moved by the power and sincerity of her performance. Tears filled her eyes, not out of nervousness but out of gratitude and joy. She had shared her music with the world, and the world had listened. Backstage, other competitors approached her, offering congratulations and words of admiration. Some of them were seasoned performers, yet they acknowledged the beauty and emotion in her music. She smiled, realizing that talent was not just about technical skill but also about the ability to connect with others through one's art. The judges, too, praised her performance, noting her expressiveness, precision, and the emotional depth of her playing. After the competition, she returned home with a sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. Her family embraced her, proud and supportive. She reflected on her journey from that day when she had been mocked for touching a piano to now, when she had stood on a national stage and left the audience stunned. The contrast was overwhelming, and yet she felt a calm satisfaction rather than prideful arrogance. She understood that her journey was about more than recognition. It was about growth, courage, and the joy of pursuing her passion. Over the following weeks, she continued to perform at various events, inspiring other students with her story. Some young musicians approached her, asking for advice and encouragement. She shared her experience openly, explaining how important it was to practice, to believe in oneself, and to never give up even when others doubted you. She became a role model, not because she was the most talented, but because of her perseverance and humility. Her relationship with music grew deeper. She began composing original pieces, pouring her experiences, thoughts, and emotions into her creations. Music became a language she used to understand herself and to communicate with others. She realized that her story, her struggles, and her triumphs were embedded in every note she played. It was more than an instrument. It was a reflection of her life. She also found a sense of peace with her past. The laughter and mockery that had once caused her so much pain no longer held power over her. Instead, they became reminders of her strength and determination. She forgave those who had doubted her, and used the memory of that pain as motivation to continue improving. It was a powerful lesson. Obstacles and criticism could be transformed into fuel for growth. Her teacher, who had been by her side throughout the journey, continued to guide and encourage her. He introduced her to advanced techniques, music theory, and performance strategies. She absorbed every lesson eagerly, knowing that learning was a lifelong process. With each new skill, she gained more confidence and depth as a musician. The bond she shared with her teacher grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and a shared love for music. The girl also began to understand the importance of community. She joined a local music group, collaborating with other talented musicians. Playing together taught her the value of teamwork, listening, and harmony, both in music and in life. She discovered that music could bring people together, transcend differences, and create shared experiences that words alone could not express. One evening, as she played her favorite composition at home, her younger brother sat quietly nearby, listening intently. He had watched her journey unfold, From the timid girl who feared the piano to the confident musician she had become. When she finished, he said softly, "You make it sound like magic." She smiled and ruffled his hair, realizing that her music had the power to inspire and touch even those closest to her. Over time, she began to dream even bigger. She imagined performing in larger venues, sharing her music with wider audiences, and continuing to grow as an artist. The foundation of courage, practice, and determination that she had built over the years became the driving force behind her aspirations. She understood that success was not instantaneous but earned through patience, effort, and resilience. Through every step of her journey, she never lost sight of the joy that first drew her to the piano. The sound of the keys, the feeling of her fingers moving across them, and the emotions she could express through music remained at the heart of her passion. No matter how far she advanced, she always remembered the little girl who had once been mocked, practicing alone at night with a worn-out keyboard. That memory kept her grounded, humble, and appreciative of every opportunity. As the years went on, her story became known in her school and community. She was often invited to share her experiences with younger students, encouraging them to pursue their passions despite fear or doubt. She spoke about resilience, practice, and believing in oneself. Her journey from humiliation to triumph became a source of inspiration for many. Looking back, she realized that the journey was never just about playing the piano. It was about discovering herself, learning to face fear, and understanding the value of perseverance. Every note she played carried a part of her story. Every performance was a celebration of growth, and every challenge she overcame strengthened her spirit. She continued to practice, perform, and compose, always seeking to improve and share her music. But above all, she cherished the lessons she had learned along the way: courage in the face of doubt, patience through struggle, and the power of persistence. Her story had begun with a single, hesitant touch of the piano, but it had grown into a lifelong journey of discovery, expression, and joy. In the quiet moments, when she played alone at home, she sometimes thought of that day when she had been mocked. Instead of sadness, she felt gratitude. That moment had been the spark that ignited her determination and passion. It had taught her that even in the face of ridicule, one could find strength, rise above fear, and create something truly beautiful. And in that beauty, she had found herself, her voice, and her place in the world.